So, good afternoon, everyone, to all our participants joining the third webinar in this series of ELT Talks, organized by the British Council Argentina. Our topic today is how to keep my students safe, preventing, detecting, and taking action. My name is Graham Stanley, and I'm the English programs lead for the Americas at the British Council, and I'll be your host today to discuss a topic that is at the center of all of our classes in the education sector, especially important for teachers. And it is how to keep students safe, preventing, detecting, and taking action. Let me remind you first of our house rules. You are welcome and encouraged to share your comments and questions during the webinar. Please make sure that you maintain a respectful and positive communication, and remember not to share any personal or sensitive information. Please note that harmful, violent, or inappropriate comments will be removed, will not be tolerated. So we will deactivate the chat briefly at the beginning, at the end of the session, so we can post some links of interest. The question and answer function will be available during the entire session. So please write your questions there, and we will do our best to go through them all during the talk or at the end of the session. As always, I'd like to thank our supporting partners, the Teaching Touch and Twinkle Argentina, and you'll find in the chat links to their excellent content. Now, let me welcome our speakers today, Sofía Pavone and Antonella Donofrio. They are both teacher coordinators at the British Council, and one of their main responsibilities is to keep students safe. Antonella Donofrio holds a BA in English Language in Universidad del Salvador, a master's degree in teaching English as a foreign language, Universidad Europeo del Atlántico, and a certificate in English language teaching to adults, Cambridge University. She participated in the School of Human Sciences of the University of I can't pronounce this, so apologies in advance. I'll try. Ivalskilka, Finland, where she learned about new trends and teaching methods. In addition, she holds certificates in applied neuropedagogy and educational technology. She's been working at the British Council as an English language teacher since 2020 and as a remote teacher coordinator since 2022. Sofía Pavone holds a degree in teaching English to primary and secondary students and a certificate in neuroscience for educators, Faculty of Medicine, Universidad de Buenos Aires. She also participated in a volunteering program as a dual language reading interventionist at Tyler Elementary in Washington, D.C., USA. She's been working as an English language teacher in the British Council since 2018 and as a remote teacher coordinator since 2022, where she's part of the safeguarding team. So now, without further ado, over to you, Sofía and Antonella. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Graham, and welcome everybody to this ELT talk, in which we will be dealing with some safeguarding issues and how to prevent and take action, and how to keep our students safe. I will be sharing screen. Can you please confirm if you can see our screen?
I can see it.
Good, thank you very much. And before starting, we would like to mention that this talk will explore sensitive themes that might be triggering for the audience. So please, if you feel affected by the discussion or if you need support, you can contact the British Council email address from which you have been sent the invitation to this meeting. Besides, in this talk, we will also ask questions about the topic. So please, if you would like to share some personal experiences, please do not use personal names or surnames. So let's start. And as Graham said before, today's topic is how to keep our students safe, preventing, detecting, and taking action. And it's important to bear in mind before starting that we are not social workers, law enforcement, psychologists, or doctors. But we are in constant contact with children and teenagers who are sometimes vulnerable. And as teachers, we have the duty of care. And in many opportunities, our students and their families trust us and tell us about situations in which they are potentially at risk for a variety of reasons. And it is our responsibility to detect if they are at risk and to know what to do in these cases. So I would like to ask you, have you ever been, for example, in a situation in which you learned that one of your students was experiencing violence at home, for example? And if so, did you feel prepared or know what steps to follow in that situation? Feel free to share that in the chat. We'll be having a look at it. Thank you, Graciela, for sharing that. Graciela mentioned in the chat that she was not prepared. Okay, some others are saying that they didn't know what to do. They felt complete at loss. It's a pity to read that, but hopefully you will get more resources on how to do in these situations after this talk. And brief question that we will be answering in a couple of minutes. What do you understand by safeguarding? You can briefly mention that in the chat. If you see that we are looking up, it's because we are looking at the chat in our second monitor. Thank you, Tatiana.
Okay, protecting.
Being able to help, keeping students under control. Sure, the question is, what do you understand by safeguarding? Protecting, keeping safe.
Yeah.
All these things are definitely related to safeguarding. And one of the objectives of today's talk is to increase our understanding of what safeguarding is, what abuse is, and the different types of abuse that we may encounter, what the possible symptoms and signs of abuse are, and what actions can be taken. So let's dive into safeguarding then.
Thank you, Anton. So the term safeguarding is used to denote the measures taken to protect the health, well-being, and human rights of individuals, which allow people to live free from abuse, harm, and neglect. Which do you think are the key elements of a safe environment? You can write the answers in the chat box.
Thank you, Graciela, for sharing.
Yes. Communication, confidence, respect, trust. Yeah, of course. Respecting others' opinions. Thank you for your answers. Yes, an environment that's safe is an environment in which students can express themselves and be heard, respected, without being judged. And the key elements in a safe environment, as you mentioned, are trust, respect, and empathy. So now we will talk about what abuse is. What do you know about abuse? What is abuse for you? You can write the answers in the chat box.
We have a good one. Taking advantage of someone due to some reason, lack of respect, going beyond limits, trespassing somebody's limits, lack of communication, to violate students' rights, bullying.
So thank you for your answers, everyone. And according to the World Health Organization, abuse or maltreatment constitutes all forms of physical and or emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, or negligent treatment or commercial or other exploitation, resulting in actual or potential harm to the individual's health, survival, development, or dignity in the context of a relationship of responsibility, trust, or power.
So I think that this definition encompasses all the things that you have previously mentioned
Yes.
in the chats.
And what types of abuse do you know? Sometimes when we talk about abuse, we think of physical abuse, but there are different types of abuse. Could you write that in the chat box, please? Yes, physical, emotional, sexual,
Financial, psychological.
Good. Blackmailing there.
Verbal abuse, economic.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. And as you are writing in the chat box, there are many different types of abuse, and now we will describe some of them.
Exactly. And the first one we would like to mention is physical abuse. And this one refers to using a violent form of physical force to inflict a physical pain or injury. This may involve hitting, shaking, throwing, burning, and so on. Here, the idea of the one that is abusing is to do harm to an individual. Parents, other adults, or carers who, for example, hit children depending on the grades they get can be an example of physical abuse. That can be a situation that can be considered an example of physical abuse. But as you well mentioned, this is not the only one, and there are other types, such as
emotional abuse that refers to humiliating and degrading treatments. For example, insults, criticism, humiliation, and or isolation. And it may involve conveying to children that they are worthless, unloved, inadequate, or valued only so far as they meet the needs of another person. For example, if they get good grades. And also, some level of emotional abuse is involved in all types of ill treatment of a child, though it may occur alone. Parents, other adults, as Anto mentioned, or even children insulting others, or a learner, for example, are examples of this.
As you can see, this topic is rather tough as we go on, and let's continue diving into different types of abuse. And the next one is sexual abuse, and it's directly related to sexual violence, that is to say, incest, early marriage, rape, exposure to or participation in pornography, and sexual slavery, for example. This involves forcing a child or an individual to take part in sexual activities, whether or not the child is aware of what is happening, or whether or not the individual gives consent. And these activities may involve physical contact or not. Another example of abuse can be bullying. Bullying is another example of abuse. That is an act of aggressive behavior. And bullying can be mental, can be physical, and can also be sexual. So it is something that we as teachers need to address.
And it is important to take into consideration that different instances of abuse often coexist and overlap. For example, a person who suffers from sexual abuse may also be suffering from physical abuse and or emotional or psychological abuse. Another example of abuse is neglect, that refers to not addressing basic safety, survival, and developmental needs of an individual. This is the persistent failure to meet the individual's basic physical and or psychological needs. For example, a learner who tells us as teachers that their parents are never home, that they usually skip meals and they feel hungry because they are always alone in the house and they cannot cook, could possibly be a victim of neglect.
And apart from the ones that we are mentioning, such as the previous abuses that we've mentioned, or neglect, we can also face exploitation. And this one refers to using individuals for personal or others' benefits, satisfaction, and profits in a way that can be unfair, cruel, degrading, and harmful to them. And examples of these are human trafficking and child labor. And of course, we always have these online parts.
Yes, there is also online abuse, and this refers to any type of abuse that happens on the internet, facilitated through technology. Examples of these are cyberbullying, grooming, sexting, sexual abuse online, and sexual exploitation online.
And it is important to bear in mind that abuse can take place in many forms and anywhere. Abuse can take place in the family, in the community, within organizations, or, as we said before, on the internet. Abuse can be virtual or can be in real life. And it's worth remembering that abuse is also manifesting itself in the digital world. And therefore, as teachers, we need to be aware of what is going on online.
So, what are the risks you think our students face being online? You can write the answers in the chat box.
Thank you, Victoria. And you are right. You are mentioning in the chat that stalking is also a form of abuse, especially online. Definitely.
Also grooming, you are writing there.
What are risks can appear when we are online?
Catfishing, yes.
Adult content, Privacy, sexting, blackmailing, false identities, cyberbullying, fake profiles.
Yes.
Sharing pictures without consent. That's definitely true.
Thank you very much for all your answers. And when we talk about online risks, there is this classification into 4 C's. So the first one being contact risk. And this refers to the risk of becoming a victim of interactive situations. The individual in this contact risk is a participant in the interactive situations. Also, we can face a content risk. This includes hateful content, harmful content, illegal content, and disinformation. In this case, the individual is a recipient. Contact risk is where simply being online encourages users' own risky behavior or conduct. In this case, the individual is an actor. A clear example of these are some online challenges that have become very famous, in which people are encouraged to carry out dangerous actions. And the fourth is consumer risks, and this includes a range of risks, including marketing and commercial profiling, financial and security risks. And cross-cutting risks are those touching all of the above, and that is to say the four risks mentioned.
And I want to go back to the comments in the chats, because everything that you mentioned can be classified into these four C's, because as you well said, it's not only a fake profile or a challenge that appears online, but there are several risks that our students can face while using the internet. So the question here is, what can we do to prevent these risks? And sometimes we cannot prevent abuse. We cannot prevent these risks, but we can raise awareness, and we can ask, and we should ask important questions to know what they are doing, who they are contacting, what sites they are visiting. So, for example, we can ask, where do you normally access when you're using the internet? What do you see? This gives you information related to the content they come across, to what they actively seek out. And this allows you to introduce them the concept of content risk, the risk of facing or finding something that is not appropriate for them. You can also ask, what do you do online? This can help you identify, understand, and manage their conduct online. For example, if they are chatting with someone anonymously in chat rooms, or if they are publishing personal information online. It's common for us to know that our students have like profiles on social media
in which they share personal information, pictures, personal pictures, and that is dangerous.
Yeah, and we should, as teachers, raise awareness and mention that there is a risk while doing this. We have to mention this. We can also ask them, who do you chat to online? Because this question addresses contact risks, particularly if our student says that they don't know the person with whom they are chatting in real life, because we know that this happens. There are social media, there are webs in which they can connect with people they don't know, which again implies a huge risk. And also we can ask them, which web services or apps do you use? And again, this helps introduce the risk of contract to them, because there is nothing truly free online. And we know that when we subscribe to a web, probably that web is handing out your information to third parties. So again, raising awareness and asking these questions is very important for us to know what they are doing online.
And as Anto was saying, raising awareness is key, and we should introduce this in our lessons. And at the end of the session, we will be sharing with you some useful links to find resources that you can include in your lessons to raise your students' awareness.
This type of content should be cross-curricular and should be included regularly in our lessons. And why not? We can make the whole educational community part of this. We can involve families. We should involve families, head teachers, teachers from different subjects, and we should all be aware of this and how we can prevent this. But it's very nice to know this, but how can we learn if our learners are victims of abuse and if they are at risk? And there are two different roads that we can take.
And the first one is to watch for red flags, to notice signs and symptoms. So it is vital to watch for red flags and to pay attention to those changes in a child's behavior, attitude, mood. But we should take into consideration that the signs and symptoms of abuse are diverse and they depend on the type of abuse. So as you can see on the slide, there are emotional, cognitive, behavioral signs. For example, a kid or a student that withdraws from usual activities. Changes that we can see in our lessons in our students. For example, a student that's an extrovert and all the time laughing and playing with classmates and participate in class, suddenly stops participating in our lessons and he or she becomes shyer. So that is a red flag and something that we should address. Also, frequent absences from school, rebellious or behavior and self-harm are signs of abuse. We should also pay attention to the context, to our students' context, because reported domestic violence, social or extended family isolation, some family dynamics related to roles and stereotypes and substances abuse can be signs of abuse. We should remember and also take into consideration that an individual who is being abused may feel guilty, ashamed, or confused. It is never easy to speak up, and the child may be afraid to tell anyone about what's going on, about the abuse, especially if the abuser is a relative, a family member, a friend. So when a kid or an individual comes to us to speak up, we should take into consideration 4 actions to handle that disclosure. So there.
It's important, as Sofía was mentioning, to follow, let's say, specific steps when they have the courage to come and speak. As I mentioned before, we are in a position of trust, and it is possible that kids or individuals come to us to speak up. And the first thing we should do is to receive, to listen to what is being said without displaying shock or disbelief. And this is very important. We should accept what is being said without judgment, and we should take it seriously. We have to reassure. We should reassure the individual, but we can't make promises that you are not sure if you can keep. For example, saying everything will be fine, because you cannot promise that. You don't know if actually everything is going to be fine. Besides, and this is very important, you cannot promise confidentiality. You can never agree to keep secrets, because you will have to report what you have been told to someone else. And also acknowledge how difficult it must have been for that person to talk. Next, you should react. You listen quietly, carefully, and patiently. Please don't ask leading questions, but open questions, such as, is there anything else that you want to tell me? Communicate with the individual in a way that is appropriate to their age, understanding, and preference. It might be more complex if we are dealing with little kids. But explain them what you have to do next and who you have to talk to. And do not discuss the topic with anyone outside the child protection team. These are serious issues that should be addressed confidentially with the team that is in charge of them. And then record the date, the time, the place, and the words used by the individual and how that individual came to you. Please be specific and keep it factual. Don't write your own conclusions. Just write what the person has mentioned. And if we think about all this, of course, we should bear all this in mind. But as we have been saying during the talk, some actions can be taken. And one of the most important things is to raise awareness. But also, we can do some prevention.
Yes, we can take some actions that are preventive to reduce the likelihood of a child or an adult being harmed or abused. We should understand risks in our activity and plan mitigating measures and raise awareness of safeguarding risks and best practices among students, parents, guardians, and the whole school community. And we must report all incidents and concerns following established channels. In our case, here at the British Council, we have, for example, an online site where we do this, and some staff members are appointed as special focal points to support teachers with these cases. Do you know what the procedures or contact person is in your school institution where you work?
We have a very interesting comment in the chat that was,
yes.
What do you mean by child protection team? Most schools don't even have a dedicated team. And it is key to identify exactly who is in charge of these situations, because mainly at schools, it is the headmaster, the headmistress.
Yes, sometimes the reporting mechanism is as simple as letting the head teacher know.
And sometimes there is a group of professionals at school which involves probably a psychologist, the headmistress, a social worker, but of course it depends on the school. Always refer to the person that is in charge of the institution. So as you can see, and as we have mentioned, you can take preventive and also reactive actions. Of course, we can continue and we can go on and on and on with this topic, because it is indeed a very interesting, a very sensitive, and a content that we can discuss for hours.
And necessary. because as we mentioned before, we as teachers are in constant contact with individuals that may be at risk, that may be suffering from abuse.
So if you want to continue reading, we will be sharing with you some very useful links, because there are guidelines for example, the city of Buenos Aires, the province of Buenos Aires. There have been guides designed by UNICEF and by UNESCO, guides that you can access and that you can have a look at. And there are also British Council resources available, such as safeguarding kids, safeguarding learners online, how to build a secure online environment, the challenges of remote learning and safeguarding. At the end of the session, you'll be getting an email with all these links and information for you to have them handy. And I've seen in the chat that you have been shared the resources that you can bring to your classrooms. These activities are focused on raising awareness among learners, because as we have mentioned before, it's one of the first steps we should take, raising awareness among learners. And of course, if you have further comments or questions, please don't hesitate in contacting us. Our email addresses can be seen on screen. So before I'm sharing screen, I will keep them there in case you want to write them down to ask us questions. And of course, at the end of the session, you will be also share these addresses in case you want to contact us.
Thank you very much for listening and for all your contributions also.
And we hope you have taken useful advice and ideas to bring to your classrooms. So now I will stop sharing screen, and we're all now invited to listen to your questions and comments.
So thank you very much, Antonella and Sofía, for sharing all that very interesting advice and information, and very interesting insights. I believe that all teachers should be more aware of this type of information. I'd like to encourage people to write questions in the Q&A section. I know that people have been putting quite a lot of comments in the chat, which I can pick up on as well. One of the things I'd like to start with while we're waiting for questions to be asked is to ask you, you did mention, for example, that it's very important to have a mechanism at school or wherever teachers work. So it's very clear what happens if there is some concern, so teachers can actually report their concerns to someone. And should be very obvious. It shouldn't be very difficult for teachers to try and figure out who they need to tell and how they need to tell. And I think, I wonder if you have any advice other than the fact that I think probably if teachers don't know this, then they should bring it up maybe at meetings, talk to their head teachers to try and find out and have maybe establish a system where there is a contact name or number or email address where in confidence teachers can be encouraged to share. Because I think it is true, isn't it? I think that one of the problems with safeguarding is that it needs to be very easy for teachers to raise concerns, and to raise concerns confidentially and anonymously sometimes. And they should be encouraged to do so, because one of the big problems with safeguarding is underreporting, isn't it?
Yes.
So if you have any other advice for teachers related to that, and what they can do to kind of get some kind of process in place.
Thank you, Graham. So I believe that one of the most important things we should do as teachers that are in constant contact with individuals, children, adults, teenagers, is to become familiarized with the protocols we have at the city, at the department, at the province we are teaching, we are working. I think Victoria already shared some useful links in the chat box, and there you will find a very specific guidelines related to safeguarding and to reporting mechanisms. And also, as you were saying, it is essential that we communicate with our to-go person. It can be a coordinator, it can be the head teacher, somebody at the institution we are working at, but it is important for us to know who this person is.
And also, as a teacher, if you believe that you don't have enough information, and if you believe that you need that, don't hesitate in asking your coordinator or the head teacher for that information. We are lacking a protocol. We are lacking how to proceed in this situation. Could you please facilitate that?
Yeah.
Could you please help me with this? Because I don't know how to proceed. And it's their responsibility also to help you deal with these situations and to give you this information.
Yeah, I think that comes back to the fact that it's necessary for everyone to take an interest in this, isn't it? For all teachers, not to think, well, it's not my job. It's actually, if we're able to help children or other vulnerable people, vulnerable adults, for example, with safeguarding, then I think it's necessary for everyone to kind of step up and take a share of responsibility in this.
Yes.
For it to be so actually becoming active in your school and contacting coordinators and head teachers is a really positive thing that you can do if it's not clear what's in place. Now we have quite a few questions coming in, so I'm going to start asking you some of them. Reminder to everybody to carry on posting your questions in the Q&A section. Julia Asuramendi asks, how do you get parents involved in this? Is there a way that you can actively involve parents in safeguarding, and how would you start doing that?
I would go for parents and teachers meetings. I know they are at some point some teachers' nightmares, but these are truly necessary. We need to involve families. We do have learners with access to the internet, to access to social media without any control. So we do need to organize meetings, and we need to bring prepared activities to those meetings. We need to raise parents' awareness also. So organize meetings, bring activities,
and maybe also start implementing simple projects as part of our activities, our lessons, and involve parents in those tasks. For example, if we want to raise awareness regarding online safety, we can ask students to ask questions in their families and to involve families, parents, our guardians in those projects, because safeguarding should be everybody's concern.
Yeah, great, thank you very much. Tatiana Raimundo has a kind of comment, but I think there's a question embedded in this as well. So without truly knowing how effective schools are in dealing with these issues, it seems perhaps the child's situation could worsen. In fact, we wouldn't want a child to be punished for breaking the silence. I think that's part of it, isn't it? You need some way of encouraging children to report concerns as well.
Yes, we should still encourage them. And again, we should know what the protocol to follow is. We can check in the ministry, we can check different websites. There are guidelines for different provinces and departments that are necessary and might be helpful in those cases when we don't know what to do.
And here's a sensitive question, especially for teachers to think about. Victoria Rodriguez de Vera asks, what advice do you have for handling a situation where a fellow teacher is the abuser? Or even if you suspect a fellow teacher, but I think it's very difficult for a teacher to actually report another teacher and could be very uncomfortable. But if a teacher does suspect that, how should they proceed?
I would say that in any case, we need to report this, even if it's, I mean, our colleague. Yes, it is not something easy to do, and it will be very uncomfortable, and it can be a very challenging situation, but we have a duty of care and we have to report it. Maybe we can go to our head teacher or to a person that we trust at school, but we need to report it.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And again, Tatiana Raimundo's follow-up is, if the parents are the abusers, or if a teacher suspects that there's something going on at home, or actually finds out through the child, etc., could put the student in danger by bringing their attention to the child's symptoms of abuse. What kind of, apart from kind of establishing a protocol, but what kind of things could a teacher do or a school do if that is the case, where they suspect the parents or caregivers are involved in something that should be reported?
I think it's a very complex question and a very complex situation. And here we do need to know what the law says, because it's a very sensitive situation and we need to seek for legal advice, because there is a person at risk and the abusers might be his or her parents. So here we do need to ask what to do, because it is a complex situation. And please, when you want to handle these situations, remember that you are not alone and you are not the only responsible for this situation. You want to help that child, you want to help that individual. So please ask other people to help you. Apart from the head teacher, ask whoever you need.
Yeah, maybe a social worker.
Yes,
sometimes we need to seek for advice from
for professionals that deal with these complex situations.
And this is where the protocol would really help, wouldn't it? Because
yes,
if a school has a protocol that the teacher should consult first their coordinator and or head teacher, then there can be a discussion about what the head teacher should be in a position to be able to discuss what measures should be taken subsequently. And also just to kind of
has its own protocol, and we should get familiarized with that first in order to know the steps we should follow.
Yeah, because of course you want to make sure that you're not sort of doing something on an ad hoc basis without properly considering consequences and making sure that, we want to make sure that everything is reported, but we also want to make sure that we're very sure about what we're reporting, or to have things in place to be able to be sure about it. So there's a number of other questions come in, which I think we have time to address. Monica Beatrice Ziegler asks, how do you suggest bringing this up with all the school staff? So if there isn't a protocol in place and you want to kind of inform the teachers and the other school staff about it, what's the best way of doing it? Would that be in a kind of all teacher meeting, or should the teacher go to the coordinator first, do you think?
I would call for a teachers meeting first to involve the teaching community, and then again, parents and teachers meetings will be also helpful in these situations. As we said before, we should all be aware of safeguarding. It's not just a matter of someone, but a matter of everybody.
Great. Silvina Abib Romano asks a question. I'm going to expand a little bit. Her question is quite specific, but I think it deserves expansion. So Sylvina's question is about how should we deal with parents that minimize any kind of violence or in denial of their kids being bullied. But in general, if a teacher is concerned at the school about anything and anyone is in denial, if the head teacher or coordinator, for example, doesn't want to make a big fuss of it, or the parents, etc., how would you deal with people who are in denial or at least not even prepared to listen to these kinds of concerns? Lots of difficult questions for you both.
Yes, indeed.
I think I would collect evidence. I know that sometimes bullying happens outside school, and we were talking about that before. Sometimes bullying occurs online, sometimes bullying occurs while playing video games, but I will try to look for evidence. And again, I will try to ask for help. Maybe the psychology at school can help me. Maybe there is someone else who has gone through this situation and can give me some advice. And I think I want to highlight this because, again, we are not alone and we can ask others for help.
And guidance and advice, especially in these very difficult and challenging situations.
Yes, thank you. Elizabeth Burgos says, is there a law in Argentina? I guess not. You might have it in other countries, for example, Spain, UK, etc. But I'm imagining some of the links that you provided are related to that, aren't they?
It's actually in the chat.
There is a law, isn't there?
Guía Federal de Orientaciones. There you can find a guide that applies to your province.
Great, thank you. So please do have a look at the links that that have been shared in the chat for further information. There's a lot of links there, but I think it's worth spending your time looking at the advice there and a lot of very useful information.
There is a lot of information in these guidelines and protocols we are sharing in the chat box.
Great, thank you. Julia Azurmendi, again, are there any statistics referring to the incidence of the problems in the world?
I think there are.
Yeah.
We should just Google it and
look for that information.
Yes, and something that has been shown by means of statistics is the fact that abuse tends to occur more oftenly among family members, relatives, and people that know the child. So we should be very careful with that too.
Yeah, and I think this is a reason why we need to be all aware of the uncomfortable situations and they're not very pleasant things to think about, but I think we do need to be aware and on the lookout for any signs of concern, as you suggested, didn't you? So Eva Blanco says, I report the situation with steps we need in my province, but nothing happens and the child continues in the same situation. I don't know what more to do. So I'm assuming from Eva's question here, it sounds like there's a specific case that she's already tried to report. So this doesn't seem to have gone very far. So what would you suggest Eva does?
I would look for advice, for suggestions, and for help, because we as teachers have a duty of care, but we are not social workers, lawyers, or doctors. So we need to look for advice and guidance as well.
And sometimes we need to seek for advice, not from our end, but from the school's end. So maybe asking the school to do something else can help.
Okay, thank you. It's a difficult situation.
Yes,
yes, it
that
is.
will help you, Eva. Sofía Vera how should we approach the bully's parents when they do not believe their child is being abusive to others?
That's another difficult one.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a difficult one.
Again, it's probably through a teacher would
And it
probably
depends.
need to go through their coordinator and head teacher, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Again, I would ask for help. I would resort to evidence, and I will try to show specific situations or recall specific situations in which we have observed this inappropriate behavior.
Okay, thank you very much. So I keep thinking it's the last question, then another one pops up. So we have got a couple of minutes left, so maybe this will be the last question. So Maria Paula Miguel, in the ESI, there is a protocol to follow. It's more of a information.
Yes, it's a statement.
Question.
Yes, and you can find that in the Guía Federal de Orientaciones and in the protocol for Ciudad de Buenos Aires also.
And some other advice there from Montserrat Dorcaz-Pero says there's a short film that is called Are You Okay? Which is a really good film to watch with teens about this topic, which is a good idea, isn't it, to raise the awareness of the students, of teenagers perhaps in particular, of this, using material like that would be good. Right, I'm going to finish with a comment again from the last comment. Ivelis Acosta says, I think we all as teachers should always think about two important concepts when we prepare our teaching, instruction and education. So being aware and raising awareness of this amongst colleagues and amongst students is a really, really good advice, isn't it?
Definitely. And as we said before, we should all be involved in this. Safeguarding is not just a matter of one, but a matter of everybody.
Everyone, yes.
Of course. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. So let me thank again our fabulous speakers for having joined us and for your great presentation. So a huge thanks to you, Antonella and Sofía, for sharing this information and advice about such an important topic. Thank you very much to all of the teachers who have participated today in the chat. Lots of really interesting comments and questions from you. Very thought-provoking, some very difficult questions. And please remember to complete the attendance survey if you would like to get your certificate for today's session. We've shared the link in the chat. Please make sure you keep an eye on our social media and the British Council website, where we'll be keep on posting information about this ELT series and a lot more tools and information for you to help with your professional environment. Thank you very much for joining us today, and it's goodbye from me.
Thank you very much, Graham, and thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.